Oh, oh no. Okay.
Skipping classes.
What?
Yeah, talking about skipping classes.
I was so far down. Well, it's still to president.
Yeah. I've got
For first.
8 cents.
Yes, that's really good. What's wrong? Oh, we might have it. Maybe I'll get the extra credit next year if I retake the class.
You bank it between now and then, you might pass, right? Uh-huh. You know, I'm just messing with you, right? Okay, so lecture 11. The excitement continues to build. So student hours are canceled this afternoon. I have something personal I have to take care of. The second question is due lecture 12 or this Wednesday. So if you haven't turned in two, make sure you get them in. Thursday, we'll continue on in lab, continue on silage making. You'll have an opportunity to work with your feed ID, and we'll start with our dry matter math. How do we make conversions? How do we make calculations using our dry matter information? Those are the next two exams coming up. Any questions? So 1/3 through the semester and accelerating fast. So we have Kirsten and Kelly today. Kirsten and Kelly. Both of you got it down. And then we have Bree and Megan for Thursday. Yeah, that's the beauty of a coster. We don't have to sit there. So course policies, drawing your attention back to the syllabus. Everybody remember this or not? So one of them, cell phone should be turned off or silenced and should be out of sight. So now that I know your names, we're going to start enforcing this. You want to pass any class, you need to focus your attention. What percentage of the week do I have you? If we take 4 hours out of a week, that's 1%. Spending 1% of your week with me. I want you to pay attention. I want you to learn. As we go through, we're building. One concept leads to another, leads to another. So if you start to fall behind, there's going to be certain sections of the class that are going to be difficult. So what do we do to enforce this? As we move forward, if I see your cell phone or you're on social media with your laptop, you get the donut assignment. You owe the class a snack. So bag of donuts for everybody. So class is getting bigger, so this is a little bit more expensive. But what we'll usually do is every few weeks, I will post all the times I've seen it. And the people that are responsible for donuts will have to work together and provide the class with snacks. Any objections to this? Yes. We can talk about the job class when we get there. But for right now, this is for this class. Classes get bigger, it's a little harder to regulate. I can regulate this class. Any questions? So what is a required nutrient? We've already talked about the criteria for essentiality. We've already talked about the what is a nutrient. So we're kind of putting those things together. So required, as we mentioned before, required to do what? Required to stay alive. Anybody seen the movie The Martian? One or two? Man is living on potatoes for 500 days or whatever it works out to. There's a whole lot of nutritional requirements that he's not meeting. Like if that, throwing out, I think they might be poisonous, but if those tops of those potatoes aren't poisonous, they are a good source of B vitamins. You probably shouldn't have thrown them out. But these are the things we think about. So required where and when with our cows. How much protein is required in mid-lactation? How much protein is required as a dry cow? How much required as a wean calf? Where do we need these nutrients? Do we need them in the feed? Or do you need them at the cellular level moving through? So this should be on your handout. Any nutrient that must be provided to the cells or tissues of the animal, any nutrient that the animal cannot make itself. So we're saying required in the sense that we, on some level, since we have these animals in a case, we've got them in a fence, in a pen, or something, we're not allowing them to move around. We need to provide to them this nutrient, something that they need to stay alive. Guess I missed that one.
Thank you.
Problem with gray. Sometimes it prints, sometimes it doesn't. So any nutrient we must provide, or the cow must provide to herself. Her cells cannot make it. With bacteria, the requirements are very, very simple. They are designed to make almost all their own nutrients. You give them a little bit of oxygen, a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of sulfur, a little bit of energy source. They can make everything they need to. We don't do that as we get to more and larger animals. They no longer have the ability to produce all or make all their nutrients. What might be the benefit of not making all of your nutrients? You have time and energy to do something else, right? If you had to make and manufacture everything in your shopping cart, that would require a range of skills, a range of energy, and a whole lot of time that most of us in modern society do not have. We buy somebody else's time to make stuff for us. And that's what our four-legged friends do as well. So there's a concept of there's about 50 required nutrients. All animals, certainly all mammals, require the same 50 nutrients. give or take. There's a few more, few less, depending on how you sort through everything. The number varies by species. Like we require vitamin C, cows do not require vitamin C. They make their own. Still a nutrient that's needed, but they don't have to do it. We don't have to feed them. The cells still require it, but the animal can make it herself. And we'll talk about the differences in requirement. Is it required in the diet? Is it required to be absorbed in the small intestine? Is it required in the rumen? Where are we talking about as we move forward? So what might be some of those 50 nutrients? Water is one we've talked about already. What else? Protein. Very broadly, what's required are the amino acids. The building blocks. We don't need to feed protein. We need to feed or provide amino acids. Anything else that we might consider? Calcium. Magnesium, what was back there? Fats, certain fats are required in the diet. Vitamins. So we're looking at more or less oxygen, water, energy. It's kind of a hard thing to hold in your hand, energy, and we'll talk about that. There are 10 essential amino acids that the cells of most mammals, the liver of most mammals can't make. And we use the term, there's a couple different terms. I use fill empty vat. Phenylalanine, histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, tryptophan, valine, arginine, and it's not tyrosine, what's threonine is the last one. And we'll get to those when we get there. We have the macro minerals. There's 7 of those. Micro minerals, there's some arguments as to how many of those there are. We know that up to here are definitely required. Whether these 4 are required is a question of how far do you want to go with requirements. Vitamins, a range of those, and then the essential fats or fatty acids that are required to make things happen. So one of the distinctions we need to make with a ruminant is required by the cells versus required in the diet. We need to feed it. So we need to provide it so the cow can eat it? Or when we're getting in the bloodstream, it has to be in the bloodstream. The animal can pull it out, can do what needs to be done to provide the cells with the things they need to grow, to thrive, and survive. So required by the cells or tissues. These are the things that the animal needs to get into its bloodstream, to get absorbed into the body. So we think about primarily the small intestine that absorbs all the nutrients. You got some limited types of nutrients absorbed. You got electrolytes in the foregut. You got some sources of energy, but none of those VFAs are actually required. The small intestine does most of our nutrient absorption. So for every one of these 50 nutrients, there needs to be a transporter that takes it from inside the gut, the lumen of the gut, into the bloodstream, into the body. So these are the things that are absolutely positively required for proper cell function. So we need the minerals, we need the vitamins, we need the amino acids, we need energy, water to get all that done. Required by the cells and tissues tells us that it can't be synthesized and usually in the liver is what we're talking about, synthesized by the animal. We need outside help. We need to have these things generated by somewhere else. So we must provide it to the animal, and the amounts can vary greatly. Kilograms for some of the things like protein or energy. Kilograms of that versus parts per million. Some of the micronutrients, minerals, and vitamins, we're talking a small pinch. But having a purified diet, removing those, bad things happen. Required in the diet, the animal must eat it. Must be consumed, must be put in the mouth and brought into the digestive tract. So either needed for healthy digestive function. So we think about NDF in the gut. We need a certain amount of NDF. We're looking at cows, somewhere around 16 pounds of NDF consumed every day to keep their rumen working properly, to keep that digestive tract flowing the way it should. It's required in the diet. The animal must eat it, but there's no requirement for NDF at the cellular level. So our ruminants, our post-gastric fermenters, our ponies are going to need it to keep them healthy, but there's no cellular requirement for NDF. In fact, it only functions really inside the gut. If they must eat it, we're looking at something that cannot be synthesized in the body, in vivo. So not by the cells or tissues. Usually the liver is what we think about, or cannot be synthesized in the digestive tract. Where have we talked about synthesis in the digestive tract? No, not small intestine. Symbiosis, remember? What do the microbes provide to the cows? What do the microbes synthesize that the cows can use? Anybody remember those? Amino acids. Their bodies become the protein that they live on. Vitamins can be synthesized by the bugs and passed on to the animal. So she doesn't have to eat most vitamins because the digestive tract, the microbes in there will provide those for her, assuming what? Anybody here give B vitamin injections to their cows? Or supply B vitamins in a drench? Why do we do that? Why do we drench a cow? Anybody got any ideas? Guesses? The rumen has to be working and functioning. If those bacteria are not doing their job, not holding up their part of the symbiosis, we lose the amino acids, we lose the vitamins that they would normally produce, and providing them to the cow when that cow goes off feed, when their rumen is no longer full, becomes necessary to get her going again. So we must provide these things in the diet, one way or the other. And again, these required nutrients vary from species to species and physiological state to physiological state. So dietary requirements of cows. Most cows need 50 nutrients in about 50 nutrients, but they need far less in the diet because the microbes ferment, and in that fermentation, they provide a bunch of nutrients. So the intake requirements are drastically changed. We're thinking about dietary requirements. We need cellulose or NDF. We need a source of energy. We need a nitrogen source. We have to provide the minerals. And as a rule, we provide A, D, and E. That's something less than that list we talked before. So cellulose, energy, helps keep the digestive tract healthy, helps keep things going. Nitrogen source is going to replace our protein needs, whereas you and I would have protein, again, amino acid needs. Cows don't have that. You could feed a cow newspaper and a little urea, and she'll still produce milk. Not a lot, but she'll still produce. Minerals, those are not adjusted or modified by the bacteria. Can anybody tell me why? How do we create or destroy minerals? Nuclear reactor, atomic explosion, the way the sun generates heat and light. So none of that can happen inside, so minerals are unchanged by their digestive tract. Vitamins can be produced by the microbes, so things change. So during the fermentation, the microbes convert cellulose, break it down, rip it apart, VFA. Microbes generate a high quality amino acid profile. We'll explain more of that a little bit. And they'll generate vitamins, produce gases. So what flows from the rumen, the reticulum, is what the cow lives on. So what leaves the rumen? Microbes. They're a source of protein and energy for our cows. They digest those. Hopefully the abomasum hits them with acid, kills them, rips them apart, and then the digestive enzymes in the small intestine break things down into individual amino acids and absorbed. Same thing with the unfermented or undigested feed, stuff that has not been altered by its time in the rumen. Has anybody ever heard the term bypass related to the rumen? Has anybody heard undegraded in the rumen? RUPRIP. Okay, we'll get to that in November. VFAs. So this mash of stuff that leaves the rumen reticulum, the omasum, becomes what the cows live on, and we hope that it supplies all of the 50 things that we need. So what goes into the rumen, what's altered, what comes out. That's what comes out of that fermentation is what a cow has to live on. So we start with the fed nutrients. We need oxygen, water, energy. If we want the animal to survive, we do not need to feed her any protein at all, or any true protein at all. So we can get rid of this whole line here from a fed perspective. We're going to change that to a nitrogen source, like we talked about urea last week, and fiber, the energy source that the microbes are going to use to make that crude protein. You're going to lose some of the vitamins here, K, all the B vitamins, and C. You're going to be left with A, D, and E that need to be provided, and the fats are unchanged from a feeding perspective. So you have something less than what we started with. Our job is to take advantage of that change, provide the cow what she needs, so the microbes, the cow, provide what we need. So what's changed? Certainly the protein row. Minerals are unchanged. The vitamin row is changed. Fatty acids have not changed. And why is it all changed? the microbes, that fermentation, the symbiosis changes everything. So we're talking about nutrients consumed. A lot of times when we talk about diets, well, she's on a 18% crude protein diet, 70% crude protein diet, 1% calcium, megacals, 1.78 megacalories per pound, 0.8 calories per pound. We tend to talk in concentrations, but what we really care about is the nutrients consumed. So percentage or concentration is only part of the equation we need to know. We need to know nutrients consumed. We need to know dry matter intake, DMI. How much dry matter is she consuming? And then what are the concentrations and percentages of the nutrients in that dry matter? We don't care terribly about what the NDF content is. Yes, we do, but it can range. What I care about is I get my 16 pounds of NDF into the rumen every day. So she can have a high NDF diet and eat less pounds, or low NDF diet and eat more pounds. So this times this gives us nutrient consumed. So if we read this, dry matter intake, usually in pounds, we deal with in the real world. Scientific world, they deal in kilograms, times the percentage or concentration gives us the amount of nutrients consumed. We need 9-10 pounds of crude protein, 16 pounds of NDF, pound or so of calcium, or a half pound of calcium, quarter pound of phosphorus. We need to get those limits in. I had an argument once with somebody. We had research cows that had stopped eating. And I was just trying to find anything that would get her going again, get that rumen reactivated. And somebody's like, well, she's a dry cow. If you feed her alfalfa, she's going to get milk fever. Well, she's not going to live. She doesn't eat nothing. We need to get her started on something. So she ate alfalfa. That's what she got. I switched her to regular hay as we went through, but let's get her started. Let's get her rumen full, and then we'll worry about milk fever and all that stuff later. She wasn't eating enough to cause her milk fever. That's another one. So we want to meet the requirements. We're making sure that we have the right nutrients in the right amount. We want to hopefully balance things out. As my professor told me when I was in your shoes, moderation, not martyrdom. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want that Goldilocks right in the middle. That puts less stress on the animal. It's more cost effective, usually, to get that just right amount. There's no need to overfeed minerals. There's no need to overfeed vitamins. Although there are some people that would like you to do that. Concept of a limiting nutrient. I have this profile of 50 nutrients. One of them is going to be the limiting one for production, the limiting one for growth. I have excess of every other vitamin or mineral or nutrient except this one. You can only go with the rate of your least in a percentage basis of your limiting nutrient. So I have 100% requirement, whatever that is. If I've only got 50% of that nutrient, I can only proceed at 50% of production. If I add more of that nutrient, I get an immediate response. If I add more of other nutrients, what happens? Nothing. They're in excess already. So when somebody comes to sell you something, I have this product here. You're going to get 2 pounds per cow per day. Your question to them is, prove it's the limiting nutrient on my farm. And they'll go, huh? If it's the limiting nutrient on my farm, then I'll get a response. But if I don't, we're going to run into paying lots of money for nothing happening. So we can think about it as a barrel. Does anybody here know the old stave barrels with the pieces of wood going up, right? So if we have a barrel, we got our bands going around, we got our bottom down here. I can fill up this barrel only to the shortest stave. So if up here is 100%, of requirement, I may have some of those staves, those wood pieces that might go above 100%. I might have more than 100%, let's say for lysine. I got 120 or 110%. The lysine is not my limiting nutrient. Calcium, I'm right on 100%. Methionine, I'm at 50%. I can only fill that barrel up to that limiting stave. You got a big gap here where nothing exists. I can't fill that barrel anymore. All of the other ones are above that point. I can only produce up to 50% of my methionine requirement. If I go through and fix that, I get methionine up to 100%, then something along the way is going to be the next limiting nutrient. So we do this a lot with amino acids. Usually the limiting nutrient, we ask whether milk production is being limited by energy or protein. And if it's being limited by protein, we ask, well, is it methionine or lysine? So lysine is at 110%, and now methionine is here. Maybe over here, phosphorus, I can only get up to the next limiting nutrient, whatever that is. And then if I fix that one, whatever nutrient is next. So limiting nutrient is going to set the maximum production we can. The classic example we have with dairy cows is limiting amino acid for milk production. We've got very good at quantifying what these limits are and where we are within our diets. So adding a couple of grams of protected lysine or methionine actually gives us pounds of milk response. We have all the other nutrients, we make up our deficit, and then we can move forward and use all those nutrients efficiently to get what we need. So limiting amino acid or limiting nutrient, the one present in the lowest amount relative to the requirement. On a percentage basis, which one's the lowest? So this works for all 50 nutrients. So if somebody's coming to sell you something, they need to tell you or show that on your farm, the only way this thing works is if it's the limiting nutrient. They have to, at least it's in my mind, it's on them to prove it's my limiting nutrient. Otherwise, I'm just wasting money. I'm wasting nutrients. They're not going to help. So sometimes extra amino acids work, sometimes they don't. And that comes back to which one is the most limiting. Any questions on requirements or nutrients related to what we have to feed an animal or ruminant versus what they have to absorb? So this is a concept we'll come back to over and over again going through. So we're going to stay on the animal side here for a little bit. And we're going to define dry matter intake. So dry matter, as we've discussed in lab, is everything but the water in the feed. So it's the dry matter or the 5 other nutrients: protein, carbohydrate, fat, minerals, and vitamins. When we're dealing with ruminants, we have a range of dry matters in our feeds. Silage is 35. I think the stuff we put up in corn silage, they said was floating in that 38 range. He thinks when we actually get it in the silo and everything kind of cooked out, it's going to be down around 35. Versus hay, 90% dry matter. Mineral supplements, 99%. We've got a range of things there. If we do it on an as-fed basis, it's a little tougher to compare. So we feed ruminants on a dry matter basis. What are they consuming on a dry matter basis? The way it was taught to me, and I don't know as I necessarily agree with it, but I can eat a dry cereal and then a glass of water, or I can mix them all together and let them soak soggy, eat them that way. I'm still getting the same amount of nutrients, just different format. So has anybody here mind when things kind of food touches on plates? My sweetie hates it. So she says those partition plates are made for a reason. So nothing touches. To me, just put it all and say it's all going in the same place. I think that's probably too many TMRs in my life. So dry matter intake, why do we care? It is the center of the nutritional program. We know the dry matter intake, we can predict what the animals are going to produce. We can also get a feel for how well things are working on a farm. If I've got a lactating group that's at 45 pounds of dry matter intake, they're going to have much lower production than pen 2 up there. I think they're low 60s right now, 65. You've got 18 pounds difference in dry matter intake. They've got 18 more pounds of dry matter a day to figure out their 50 nutrients. So in order to know what the nutrient intake is, we need to get that dry matter intake. If you don't know it, you can probably back calculate it. There's enough of a relationship there that if I know how much milk is produced per cow, I can probably guess within reason what the dry matter intake is. Dry matter intake, the more we get in the cow, the more that comes out. The next pound of dry matter intake is the most profitable. We get that last pound of intake in on that pen 2. If we get one more pound, we're going to get close to 3 pounds per cow per day if we can get one more pound of feed in them. Assuming that ration is balanced the way it's supposed to be. So heifers, we're looking at 1 to 2% of body weight. So 1,000-pound heifer, 10 to 20 pounds of dry matter each day. Lactating cows have a drive to eat that we've sort of bred into them. We know that the biggest producers are eating 5, 6, 7% of body weight. Their ability to process feed almost turns them into a horse. They're almost doing passage rate, but their ability to chew, process, get the feed through allows them to produce those 200 pounds of milk a day for days on end. Typical numbers are 3.5 to 4%. Those exceptional producers will go over that. So dry matter intake sort of sets the size. Does anybody here go to store for big shop and you bring your own bags in. So where do they sit? Usually in the car, right? I always forget them and I have to run out. I leave my cart and run out, get my bags, come back in. So I got these bags. I have to fit all of those in the bags. If I don't, I can't, in theory, buy things. So dry matter intake sets the package. The smaller that package is, the harder I have to work, the more organized I have to be to provide that cow with nutrients. Everybody here know what Michael Phelps is? Yeah. He's got like 30 Olympic medals in swimming. He was eating 6,000 calories a day. What do you guys need as a rule? 2,000, you're still sort of growing and rearranging, maybe 2,500. He could eat pretty much anything he wanted as long as he ate calories and he'd get his nutrition taken care of just because of sheer volume. His package was much bigger than ours is. We have to think a little bit more. So we can think about putting small squares in a wagon. Has anybody ever done small square bales and had to be there and catch those bales? Stacking on the wagon. Has anybody done that? Why do you stack on the wagons? Get more on them. But that requires somebody to be there, putting things in, doing all those tricks of, two together and you get down in the slot. That requires more effort to get more in. If I've got a big wagon, we used to have some of the biggest hay wagons in the neighborhood, we tend to just kick everything in. It's easier to get the hay bales in a bigger wagon than it is a smaller wagon. Same with a grocery cart. Why do they give you big grocery carts? Hopefully you buy more, right? So if I've got a bigger space, I will fill it up. So dry matter intake. So if we're thinking about the pounds of nutrients needed, and I don't think this printed well at all. So we've got the diet. We've got a 16% crude protein diet. That's a little low for a lactating cow. We're going to vary the dry matter intake. And from that, we're going to calculate the pounds of crude protein consumed and then how much milk that amount of protein consumes, assuming it's the limiting nutrient relative to milk production. Protein is the limiting nutrient. So 16% crude protein, that's either a high-end sophisticated diet or we're probably a little short. If we look at 45, 50, and 55 pounds of intake, these are fairly common intakes. 45 tends to be at the low end. 55 is probably where we want to be. So if we have ventilation compromised, the cows are not comfortable, 45 is pretty typical. If we multiply 16% by the weight there, we get the amount of nutrients consumed. So pounds of crude protein, 7.2 pounds of crude protein on that 45 pounds of dry matter intake. At the other end, 55, we've got 8.8 pounds of crude protein. What's the difference in milk production at the other end? We got 75, 85, 95. So getting that intake up 10 pounds is going to give us 20 pounds more milk. So we're probably looking at $2 worth of feed here. How much is 10 pounds of milk worth? Or 20 pounds of milk worth? $4. So anytime I can invest $2 and 3 days later get $4 back, is that worth it? Potentially, right? There's a lot of circumstances that have to go in to increasing that intake. But if I can invest $2 in a cow and get back $4 from her, That's why we farm. I put the meat feed in and something comes out better. What about the pounds of nutrients needed? So we have that 8.2, that was in the middle of the other one. We need 8.2 pounds of crude protein to support the milk production we're thinking of. How many pounds of dry matter intake is she consuming? So again, we'll do that 45, 50, 55. Not unreasonable numbers. So what must the crude protein be to achieve that 8.2 pounds of crude protein intake? So we need a diet that's 18%, 18.2% crude protein on the 45-pound intake. On the 50, we've dropped almost 2 points to 16.4. Then we're getting down 1.5 points on 55. So what do you think the difference is between this diet and this diet? Learned in our feed ID, how do we get up into the middle section? Medium protein. You're going to need to feed or buy more protein to get this 18% than you are to get this. This becomes a more expensive diet. To get the same output, I have to put in more money. It's more difficult, more expensive to get the same output. If I'm down here, I should be able to produce that same milk at a cheaper level. I don't have to buy as much soybean meal. I don't have to buy as much canola meal to get that protein amount up. I'm letting the microbes do their work. I'm doing a higher forage diet down on the bottom, letting the microbes do what they do. So if we're looking at our dairy, we track 6 groups on their intake. So that top line there is our Pen 2. Historically, they're in the mid-60s. They're the mature cows, they're the bigger cows. Pen 1 and Pen 2. So the green line is Pen 1 in this case. Pen 4 is that maroon line. The problem is they've flipped in recent months. We've got our fresh cows eating more than our first lactation animals. We need to think, they used to get the same diet. Now we're thinking about separating them into 3 different diets to better tailor what those animals consume, to better invest that feed so we're not overfeeding one group and underfeeding another. We're doing both as we move through. Then our dry cows are far off animals. They're hard to get a handle on, but they're down in that 20-something range. So factors affecting dry matter intake. Anybody suggest what might influence dry matter intake? Quality of the feed. What did we know from class? How would we measure that or monitor that quality? Color, smell, touch. Higher the quality, the greater the intake. Anything else that might influence dry matter intake for our animals? Stage of lactation. You can see that sort of there, maybe. Certainly our early lactation animals are Pen 4, the maroon line, are eating less than our mature animals. later lactation. They go from pen 4 to pen 1 and 2. So later lactation, they're going to eat more. So there's a lot of different factors. We've got a whole list of them here. We'll go through next time of what increases dry matter intake and what decreases dry matter intake. So we'll stop there for today and get started with that in the next class.
You put on the board?
I can not afford. Have a good day.
No, you have a good day.
Have a great day, Professor Mooney.
No, you have a great day. You too.